The rules surrounding the registration of your classic or modified car with the DVLA have just changed. Today on Motorhaus, I'm going to be digging into that with an industry expert to find out how those rule changes directly affect you. If you're the owner of a classic or modified car, stay tuned because you're going to want to watch this. In May 2024, the DVLA launched its Call for Evidence campaign, which was a campaign where they called for industry experts and people within the restoration in the car community to contribute towards the issue of classic car registration. The Call for Evidence asked for input on a number of topics, including historic classic vehicles registration, rebuilt and restored vehicles, kit-built vehicles, vehicles converted to electric propulsion, Q registration numbers, and the vehicle identification number. I wanted to dig into the cold black and white of this topic, and to make sure that I got it right, I've invited along one of the best experts in the industry.
Afternoon, everybody. If you don't know me, you soon will. My name's Tim Kelly. I have a company called Motorclaim Guru. I do a lot of different things, so I don't just have one hat. My background is that I'm an engineer, so I inspect vehicles for a living. I act as an expert witness, as a forensic engineer. As part of that, I need to understand how vehicles are made, how vehicles are constructed, how they might have been changed. Previously, I used to work for insurance companies as an engineer, inspecting vehicles, and that's why the insurance side of what I do for Motorclaim Guru comes in. The Motorclaim Guru hat that I wear, I help people fight insurance companies when their insurance companies don't play ball. So in very much the way we know each other. If people don't know, Bob had a bad accident a while back.
I can absolutely vouch for that. Tim is the man you need on your side if something goes wrong and your insurance company don't care about you and want to screw you out of your car. Isn't that right, Tim?
Absolutely. And then it all changes.
It all changes. You get Tim on your side. So I can vouch firsthand for Tim's ability and knowledge with all of this. Absolutely. We're talking about car registration today. Tim and I had a casual chat last week. And I think we both agreed that there's an important distinction, which a lot of people maybe haven't made yet, between the car's registration number and its vehicle identification number, the VIN. So for people who maybe aren't as expert as you, Tim, in a nutshell, what's the difference between the two and how are they linked?
Well, you need to understand the relevance of them is the first thing. So why do we have registration details on a vehicle? And also things like, why do we have the 1930 Road Traffic Act, which is about having a need to hide mandatory third-party compulsory insurance? You might wonder what the relationship is between the pair of them, so I'll explain it. So at the end of the 1800s, the start of the 1900s, vehicles started becoming a little bit more prevalent on the roads. And at that time, you might have also needed somebody running in front of the vehicle, waving a red flag to warn you of it, because they saw there was a risk there. Well, prior to that point, you've got people who drive in vehicles who don't know how to drive them. Never seen one before. The nearest thing they'd use prior to that would be a horse and cart. And it wasn't unknown for them to run over people and injure them. So as a result of that, in 1906, the government made it legislation that any vehicle that was on the road had to have some type of registration attached to it. Now, the significant point of having a registration attached to it is purely as a means of identifying, one, the vehicle, two, the driver. That's right. It. That was all that mattered. When we got into the 1930s and what the Road Traffic Act, that tied into the back of that in the event that if somebody did injure you in some way, if you knew the vehicle registration and it was managed to have compulsory third-party insurance in place, that in the event if you were injured, you could track the vehicle via its registration plate so you could identify the owner so you could make a claim. So that's why we have the registration plate side of it. Now, the chassis number is something distinctive again. So technically in insurance, you actually don't need a registration plate on a vehicle to insure it and even use it on the road, because as long as that vehicle has a chassis number on it, it can be identified. And this is how when you're taking out a policy of insurance, that it might be that you want to put a private plate on it. Well, technically, the insurance policy links to the V5 and the actual chassis details on the vehicle rather than registration plate, and that's why you can change it over.
Yeah.
And that's where the distinction is. So the chassis number is what the identity of the actual vehicle is. The registration is a means of linking the identity of the vehicle to you.
Okay, so now we've identified what the crucial difference is between those two. I think in connection with this whole DVLA change in registration and so on, I think it's important that we discuss the 20-point system that existed previously, right? The wonderful 20-point system. Now, as I saw that, that was very clear guidelines on what you could modify, what you couldn't modify, what ended up making up a whole that the DVLA would say, that's this car.
So the origins of this come around, again, linked to safety is one side of it. What you have is a need to fulfill the requirements of the construction and use regulations and around vehicle conformity. So as we've gone through the various ages of vehicles, going through the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000 to where we are now, vehicles have become safer and safer and safer. And legislation's also changed, and things like pedestrian safety have also changed as well. So within the point system that they was using, the minimum requirement is the relevant safety standard of that vehicle at its time. So if you altered a vehicle in such a way, and that's the reason why I'm using this point system, that made it deviate away from an OEM specification, it might in some way make the vehicle less safe. It could be you put a more powerful engine in it, but don't upgrade the brakes and suspension, or you don't alter the wheels and tires on it, so it's not got as much grip on it. It could be that you put a welded in roll bar in it, but the positions of the roll bar inside the vehicle might be close to your head in terms of proximity. You really need to be driving it with a crash helmet rather than without one. So part of what they did was they looked at how you might alter a vehicle, and they wanted to know whether it made it more or less safe. But in doing so, it then became really, really complex, because what you're then trying to do is going, well, if we use this grading system of these 20 different points, and we say, well, if we look at the chassis of the vehicle as having 6 and the engine as having 4 and the rear axle as having 2. So there's things there that aren't related to safety. It's more about, can we establish that this vehicle is what it is? It got to be a bit of a nonsense. And the reason being is that certainly with older vehicles, and being more prevalent to rust, that it might be that you got a vehicle and the chassis rots away. So, and we even get that with fairly modern vehicles. Look at a Mitsubishi L200, they rot to pieces with the chassis on.
Right, infamous, wasn't it, with the chassis breaking in half? Yeah, yeah, and a relatively modern car, an unmodified car. Yeah.
So you put a new chassis on it. Is that vehicle the same vehicle as what it was? Well, from a conformity point of view, it is, because the specifications are the same, but it's not the same vehicle because it's changed. Now imagine then, you've got a great chassis and you've got great running gear, but the body becomes damaged in some way. Well, because it's not a monocoque chassis, it's a separate body, you could change the body and put a different body on it. But the chassis still had the same identity. So technically, what you could do is you could end up potentially ringing a vehicle, and it's not the vehicle it says it is, but because you're doing it in such a way where you're doing it piecemeal, it's pretty much like Trigger's broom, is what you've ended up with. So anybody who doesn't know what Trigger's broom is, if you ever watch Fools and Horses, look at Google a clip on YouTube, you'll find out what I mean. Well, that is in essence what it could mean. And this is then where, for the DVLA, it gets a bit more complex, because this is a factor that they have to take into consideration. So what is the identity of a vehicle? How much of a vehicle do you need to get rid of for it to lose its identity? Or is it something where, you can change the chassis on it, you can change the engine and gearbox on it, you can change the body on it. It still conforms to the specification required for construction use regulations. Does it matter? So then it's about trust then. And this is why things have changed. Yeah,
absolutely, Tim. So I think I'm going to carry on talking about the point system a bit, because this has been really the whole kind of modification, rebuild, resto mod industry to some extent has been built around this. So, I mean, obviously on the channel, I'm a classic Land Rover fan. Classic Land Rovers are a great example of where you could quite legally effectively build a classic Land Rover from the VIN number, from just the VIN plate, and you could rebuild an entire effectively new vehicle around that, and it would be completely legal to do, because you're doing a like-for-like swap of the chassis. You're just rebuilding the major mechanical components. As long as you didn't do anything like cut the chassis or change the suspension pickup points or anything like that, it'd be totally legal, which, if you think about it, it's a bit of a nonsense, isn't it?
Completely. And it's what it also did was it made things complicated, because as long as there's no theft going on, and as long as there's no vehicle cloning, which it does go on. I mean, a different aspect of what I do on the insurance side of it is, even though I act on behalf of people fighting insurance companies, I actually work for some insurance companies and I do fraud investigations. And part of the investigations I do are around vehicles being cloned, so that either been stolen or wrong, or they're pretending to be something that they're not. So things that are very common at the moment is on the fast forward scene is to do with Escort RS Turbos, Series 1s and Series 2s. Yep. Absolute rock boxes, loads of them in sheds and garages here, there and everywhere. You might often see a V5 advertised on eBay for 600 quid and the vehicle doesn't exist. And what people then do is they'll use the identity of another vehicle, steal one, say they've restored it, they've not changed the identity of it. And unless you know what you're doing, it can be really hard to identify. So I'm not saying that that doesn't exist and there isn't a need to kind of regulate the industry and make sure that we have these things that where we can hold people accountable for. So that's why the government's doing it. But in the past, even though it made it quite clear, it was too much. Whereas what they've done now is they've realised that the volume of people, so the reason why we're having this conversation is because it went through Parliament and then they realised they need to change it. They went out to motor enthusiasts, the classic car clubs, and they got feedback from about 1,600 people. So it's not a massive amount of people. They got feedback from the clubs and things. So it's not tens of thousands. And they realised that potentially they might be using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut.
Yeah.
You know, do we need to do this much for it? You know, is it a massive issue? Is it a big issue? And the primary cause of it is, like what we said when we had, you know, an off-camera chat, was as a result that the government's trying to push people into EV vehicles, and they might not necessarily want a brand new vehicle. And people are moving towards looking at converting classic vehicles. And the one that created all the contention was through with the Mini, where
really infamous case. This, right, Tim? This was all over the forums. Beautifully restored EV converted Mini, and as Tim will explain to you, it basically had its whole identity nullified, seemingly over nothing. Have I remembered that correctly, Tim?
Yeah, absolute stupidity. And again, it's things. So from an engineering point of view, so if I'm inspecting a vehicle, the key thing I look for any vehicle that's been changed, modified, or altered is the safety and how it's been done. And also that it's been done carrying out good engineering practices. With this specific vehicle, because basically it's a Mini and it's tiny, one of the requirements of it was that any major electric cable was at least 12 inches away from a major suspension component. Well, you can probably go across the whole car within, you know, in 2 foot of it.
There's not a lot of car with the classic Mini, is there, Tim? There's not a lot of car.
Space whatsoever. And what they've done with it was, in my viewpoint, completely good engineering practice. There wasn't anything unsafe in it in any way. It had been done correctly. If I was doing it myself, it's probably the same way I'd have done it myself. And all they've done was route a electric wire through a steel frame with a grommet in it. And they made sure it is all safe, but because it was in proximity with other areas, and they were saying that, you know, because of where it was located, that as a result of that, it didn't conform to the original construction use regulations for it. It's like, well, hang on, the original construction use regulations go back 50 odd years for it. So, yeah. You know, absolutely, and it's not like Minis are safe in the first place. You don't. They're
really not, are they? No.
So the whole thing was lunacy. But what it did mean was that the person who'd probably spent £100,000 on a Mini, thinking like, right, I'm going to be doing what I think is good for the environment and pollution and congestion. It might be used in London. It's still a nice car. But I want to drive a classic Mini because that's how I associate my identity. And that's why I bought a classic Mini and converted it. That all of a sudden you're telling me that I can't. So it wasn't just a matter of that it wouldn't hold its original identity. What actually happened was they said that because of how the vehicle was designed, it would have had to have gone through single vehicle type approval. And because of the age of the vehicle and the angles and the radiuses and the sharpness and all the rest of it, you couldn't register it. So it basically meant somebody spent the best part of probably 100 grand on a Mini that could never be registered and put on the road. It's just utterly
Yeah,
stupid.
it's wild. And of course, there are a lot of high-end retrofit electrification companies about now. I'm sure you've all seen them online doing very high-end, very expensive retrofit EV conversions. And I'm sure all of that has kind of triggered the conversation, as you've spoken about, of are these rules actually fit for purpose anymore?
It has as well. I mean, part of what we need to look at as well is that, I wouldn't really have gone into politics side of it, but we need to look at what benefits the country. And when we've got these nice small cottage industry businesses that are developing and growing, and then it's not just like a little cottage industry, all of a sudden it's becoming a bit bigger and it's becoming more global. We're doing exports as well. The government needs to support in that. They don't want to be making it impossible. They don't want to be putting more and more red tape in front of it. And that's what they've now sussed out. It's like they finally now grasped it and thought, hang on, yeah, are we shooting ourselves in the foot with this? Do we need to change it? How big of an issue is it? And like I said, if it was something that was being done in such a way that was causing more potential danger to people, I'd be saying, yeah, all day long, I get it. But when these vehicles are old and dangerous and they're not built like modern vehicles and they don't deform in a certain way, they're not exactly safe in the first place. So it just makes it a moot point, really. It's a bit crazy.
So we've set the scene. This is how complicated things have been up until now. This is how difficult things have been up until now. This is perhaps how the rules haven't really served people. As of the beginning of September this year, we're filming this in 2025, everything's changed. I'm reading here word for word is that the DVLA say that if you have a structurally modified vehicle, we've spoken about structural modifications, so this could be changes to the monocoque, the chassis, whatever. You now only need to get the car MOT'd and report the changes to the DVLA. Now, the other thing I should point out is that I have been all over the government website, and it looks like the 20-point system has gone out the window, Tim.
Do you want it from more of a legislative and safety point of view around vehicles being on the road and understanding that if you're modifying a vehicle, what constitutes that vehicle, its identity? So looking at the 20-point system, if you're deviating away from how the manufacturer originally designed it and you're removing something from it, it could be just something as an engine, the car's not the same as what it was.
No.
It's not the same car, it's different. So if you then change the interior on it, well, fair enough, it's the same car. If it's the same interior, it's fair enough. But if I put a completely different vehicle interior into it, it's not the same car.
No.
If I get a Land Rover, this could be a good one, and I go, do you know what? It's got solid axles on it. Might be all right off-road, but I want to have it as a Chelsea Cruiser. So what I'm going to do is going to put fully independent suspension on it. I'm going to deviate away from how it was because, it's rock hard, it's stiff, it's choppy. I like the way it looks, but it's bloody awful to drive. Horrendous thing. So I'll put multi-link suspension on it, not a solid beams on it. It's not the same car.
No,
completely different.
Yeah.
So how do you then? Because all of this is actually not to do with about modifying the vehicle. All of this is to aid the general public discern that whatever they might be potentially buying in some way has changed. That's it. That's all they want to know. Something's changed, and you want the general public to be protected. And that's what I said. Like, in some way, the line of thought behind it, of what they were doing, their interest is they're doing the right thing for the right reasons. Flick it on the other side of it. So part of what they did when they were doing it was they were following the same type of line of thought that the TÜV in Germany play. So if you live in Germany, it is almost impossible to tune your vehicle. Really, really hard because
yes, everything has to have TÜV approval that you bolt onto the car. Is that right, Tim, in Germany?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not only that as well, it also has a certificate of conformity.
Right, yep.
So you can't fit a non-TÜV part on it, but also you can't really have it deviating too far away from the specification that the manufacturer might have actually originally had planned for it. So even down to the point of, from an insurance claim point of view, if you have an accident in a vehicle in Germany, where in the UK we want to put brand new parts on it, and so you can't even tell it's ever been repaired. In Germany with TUV, they do the opposite. They want it so that if your vehicle's damaged in some way, even though it's been repaired, they actually still want it so you can tell it's been damaged. Just so that if you're a prospective purchaser on it, you're aware that it's been involved in an accident. Even though it's been repaired and it's back to how it was, they still want it to be able to discern the difference on it. So the one side of the coin, the way it was on the 20-point system was done for the right reasons. The flip side of that coin was they made it overly complex. So what we have compared to what you then got like with the TUV and what we have with this 20-point system is it now affords a person who's an enthusiast more flexibility to be able to modify a vehicle. And that could be not necessarily in terms of a kit car, a hot rod or a normal vehicle you just modifying extensively. It could also be a horse box. It could be a caravan, a motor caravan.
Right.
It could be a HGV. So it means that it's anything basically. Well, actually, no, not a HGV, because in these regulations, what they said, actually, I think there's actually a weight limit of 3.5 ton on it. So anything over that.
Is there? I didn't see that. Right. So these only, that's interesting. Okay. So there's a 3.5 ton upper weight limit to these.
I think so, yeah. I might need to go back and check on that. But it does make it interesting if you're looking at something like a 6-wheel G-Wagon.
Right. Well, it's the thing, isn't it? Like some big 4x4s, you can be knocking on the door of that.
Yeah, way over above it.
Yeah.
So it's like, but what they've tried to do, and it's because there's things where, so if anybody doesn't know me or what I do, or a background on me, I am an absolutely massive petrol head. Completely through.
This is absolutely true. Tim's ownership history of cars is a real petrol head's toy box. Yeah.
I have a problem having a standard car. The thing is, the instant I get a standard car, I generally modify it because I want to do something to it.
He's one of us, everyone. Honestly, trust me. Tim is one of us. So, yeah.
My background's a mechanic.
Yeah.
So, but when I didn't have any money, what I do with it is, you bodge, basically.
You got to make it work, haven't you?
Yeah, you got to make it work. And and if it could be something where I was modifying a vehicle and doing some welding on it, you bodge. And it's things where I'd be like, I'd even evaluate the original engineering or whatever the vehicle was and go, do you know what? Is that really the best way of doing it? Is it not a better way of doing it? And it might be that I've strengthened structural points in the suspension. I might have seam welded it all the way around. I've seam welded, I've got makes you rallying with seam welded shells all the way through.
Yeah.
Brace different parts to make it structurally stronger. Well, if you think about something like that way, going to like classic rallying, so classic cars aren't strong in any way. Modern cars are. You could probably get a brand new car now and go rallying with it, and it's still 10 times stronger than an old vehicle that has been modified.
So let's talk about something like a Mark II Escort, right? Absolute classic, classic modified car used for every kind of motorsport you can possibly imagine, right?
Yeah.
Very typical use scenario. Let's say someone's bought an old Mark II shell somewhere, got a full roll cage in. It's now got a 4-linked rear axle rather than having leaf springs on. Probably got a Duratec in and a 6-speed MX-5 box. And probably all the front suspension's different. So how much of that is still an Escort, Well,
it's not just that as well now. It's also, has the vehicle deviated away from its original specification? Absolutely. So looking at the old 20-point system, actually, you'd be fine with it on that. Because they're saying, well, you're not really deviated, it's still the vehicle it is. But on the new system, you'd now have to submit a form to say that you've altered the vehicle bodily. But the interesting thing around when you look at the wording on the website around this recent release is, on the one hand, it uses the word must in places. So if you do this to your vehicle, you must do that. And then the other side of it is that when you read through all the actual website and again, even construction use regulations, but anything to do with these recent changes, there is nothing punitive should you not do it. So you could alter your vehicle in every single way you can think of, and it's up to you as to whether you actually tell the DVLA or not. Now, if I was in your situation, you've got a vastly modified vehicle, and you were asking Motorclaim Guru, what should I do? I'd say you need to follow the information that's on the website. If you were asking Tim Kelly as a modifier of vehicles, whether you're going to cause a headache in doing something, actually do you want to draw attention to yourself, the only conclusion I could come to, I couldn't tell you what you can do and what you can't do, but I'd probably just not draw attention to myself.
That's a very
So,
politically neutral way of saying it. It don't draw attention to yourself. So
yeah.
the thing that's hit me about this, which is my massive concern with this, and I don't know if anyone else has picked up on yet. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But thus far, like you say, you are meant to report the changes you've done to the DVLA, and then they will decide for you if your car gets to retain its identity. And what really concerns me is we now no longer have any black and white guidelines as to where is the line with that? Where do you lose the vehicle's identity? That is my big concern in all of this. Have I got that right?
You have. Yeah. So what you've got is that if you've got a checklist you can tick through, you know where you are.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're doing now is you're relying on subjectivity. But what I've also said is that because you're now relying on subjectivity, if you do all the things that they're asking you to and require it, and you submit that information to them, and then, so this thing is, there's no legislation in place saying that you have to do it. There's no punitive actions that can be taken against you if you don't do it. Then is it wise to draw attention to yourself when, if the identity of your vehicle is something precious to you and the way it's registered, so it might have, it's got a plate on it that has value, do you want to put yourself in a prejudicial situation? And that might not be information that most people would want me to say, whether it's correct or not. So I'm saying this for educational purposes. I'm not saying whether you should do this or not. I'm just saying it as somebody who reads everything.
Yeah.
But, and also I'm doing it to be a devil's advocate, to help people understand both sides of the same equation. Whatever people choose to do is up to them. And should there be some type of ramifications at the end of it, they need to carry out their own investigations other than just watching this podcast to understand whether there is a punitive action that could be taken against them or whether there is any legality or illegality. But as far as what I can see and what we've discussed with Bob before we did it, I've not seen anything. And I don't know, have you seen anything, Bob?
I haven't seen anything. I have, and it's interesting because there used to be pages and pages and pages and pages about all of this with what you could modify, what you couldn't modify. It now seems to have been boiled down to basically one page on the government website. I know, like one page. And the bottom line, it seems to me, is that we'd like you to tell us what you've modified or changed on your car, and then we'll decide for you. But I also haven't found anything saying failure to disclose this information carries an X penalty, right? I haven't seen anything towards that whatsoever. So again, as a professional motoring journalist and someone that likes to abide by the laws of the land, that's what you are expected to do. But then you would also, from an academic point of view, have to say, well, if there are no ramifications, if there are no punishments, if there's no legal fine or criminality attached to this, what is the what am I looking for here? What's the motivation for people to follow those guidelines?
So I'll give you some motivation then. So again, I'll flick something else into the arena.
Right.
So the only elements of where the DVLA could come at you with is around taxation and use. So whether the vehicle is a commercial vehicle or a private light goods vehicle is one side of it. And it also might potentially affect insurance as well, which is where it gets into my arena. So these are things that
that's
you need
a
to be
very
aware
good
of.
point. Yeah, insurance, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're insuring a vehicle, there is a piece of law which is called the 2012 Consumer Disclosure and Representations Act, where the insurer is reliant upon the information you provide to them when they ask you. So there's no requirement for you to offer information to them, only to answer questions when they ask you. So if they ask you if your vehicle's modified and you tell them it is, if they don't ask you whether the vehicle conforms to the original specification from the manufacturer, which they never ask you that question because it's not something I never expect them to ask you, then there shouldn't be any reason why they can't show you, as long as they're aware of all the modifications you've done to it and you've declared everything. Because the risks to an insurance company is around third-party liability. So if you alter your vehicle in some way where it could potentially leave the road and crash into somebody, that's a risk to them. If your vehicle potentially doesn't deform the way it should do in the event of an accident, and you've got a passenger in the vehicle and they get personal injuries as a result of it, they could say, well, if you've altered that vehicle structurally from how it should have been, you might be liable for the third party's personal injuries. So those are the only things I can really see where somebody can come out of you, but it won't be through the DVLA. It would be further down the line with the connotations attached to altering the vehicle, because if the insurance company could say, well, you altered that vehicle and didn't tell us. And if you declared your modifications, then, well, I did do, but it'd be down to the insurance company to say, well, has it been inspected by somebody like me to make sure it's been done safely? So it might be, as a result of these changes, I don't expect to see it straight away, but potentially in the future, you might find that a prudent insurance company might say, we understand that you've advised us of these modifications, but who did them? Did you buy the vehicle in that way, or did you modify it yourself? Has it been done by a company? So what standard has it been modified to in terms of the quality of the work being carried out? And does it comply with construction use regulations, or is it, so I think the one thing I have seen about it was to do with welding, actually, in the recent documentation. Some modifications that any panels that have been changed need to be seam welded, I think was one of them.
Yes, so, that's right. Yeah, had to be a continuous seam weld, I think, wasn't it?
Had to be a continual seam weld all the way around it. So it might be things like that, because they might be fearful that the vehicle might perform differently.
So, I mean, yeah, you could have a situation whereby a vehicle by the manufacturer had bonded panels, right, rather than continuously seam welded panels. So it almost seems that this is deliberately forcing people to rebuild and restore the car in a way that doesn't conform with original manufacturer specifications. Is that right? That seems nuts.
Well, this is what I find frustrating. So from an engineering point of view, whoever wrote that isn't an engineer.
No.
Because it's what they're thinking about there is old technology in terms of what they believe to be a right way of doing something. Because it might be that you don't want a continuous weld all the way through, on a panel. Welding material is a lot harder and more brittle and stiff than a normal metal, and it might be that you want the metal to fold and bend, where with this, with this big steel weld, it won't do. You might want it to tear as well. There's some panels where it's designed from the manufacturer so that when it gets impacted, it either folds, deforms in some way, or actually tears off the vehicle. And that's the reason why they do have spot welds every so far, rather than it just being one continual seam, because we need that engineered into the vehicle. So whoever wrote that they're not an engineer. I was going to say something else completely different. Yeah, they're not an engineer.
They're not an engineer. Not an engineer.
No, they don't understand engineering if that's what they think with it.
Absolutely.
But because you've got things like this. So before I referred to about the insurance side of it. So as an example, we talked about a Mark II Escort, something like that. If you do it to a Group 5 standard, you'll have a fully seam weld body shell. You'll have a fully welded in roll cage, probably a Baby Atlas, diff on the
classic setup, right? Classic setup. Yeah.
And as part of what you're doing, that you're having like a Baby Atlas on it and trailer link 5-panel suspension and tubbed out in the back of it, is that everything in the back of that car will be completely different. Everything, just because all the mounts are different. But what you also then be doing is the roll cage will then be tied into the suspension mounts, because you want to make sure that the suspension mounts don't move, because then that way you can design your tolerances around your geometry a lot better, so it's going to handle better. But then you're going to run that all the way through the vehicle, and you're going to have it caged down the side of the B pillars to protect you as well, going across where your legs are to protect you from side impacts and stuff like that, going across into the front bulkhead and across the front bulkhead on the inside of it. So in essence, you've got two chassis going on, but you're also going to be tied through the A pillars and then into your front struts as well. And then if you've got something like, again, a World Rally Champion cross member on it, all that's tied in as well, or welded in. So if you imagine then that I've got a separate side story why I know all this information, because I had to inspect such a vehicle. But if you think about that, then this vehicle now is probably as stiff as anything we've got on the road, as a new vehicle, even though it's a 50-year-old car. But the danger of that is that from a performance orientated vehicle, it's going to be fantastic. But from a passenger safety point of view, it's not, because it's been designed not to deform and be really, really stiff.
Yeah.
So if you alter your vehicle in such a way, but you haven't got, as an example, padding around the roll bars to protect your head against impact on it. But if you were a passenger in such a vehicle and it has a big off, if you're not using normal safety restraint seatbelts, you're going to get injured. If you move around in that vehicle, you might hit the roll bars or the dashboard because you're not, so because it's not got airbags in it, it's so on a vehicle like that, you would need to go down the full performance route of fully strapped in, minimum 4-point harness, but probably 5, absolutely. So you can't move and you're stuck in the seat, because once you're wedged in, you're fine. So there's things there where, from an insurance company's point of view, if they find out that you've altered the vehicle in some way and you've strengthened it, structured it, then going down the route of modifying it for performance and, for racing, rallying, or whatever, drifting, that it could potentially affect the underwriting. So that's the alternative flip side of, it's the flip side of what the DVLA is done, where that is potentially where the risk of it, where when they had 20-point system, at least you then knew, you kind of knew what you were going through when you're doing with it. So there is a link there with the actual identity of the vehicle, but there's also the secondary side of it in terms of when you register a vehicle on the V5, what does it say the vehicle conforms to? Like I said, if it was a light commercial vehicle, you might have converted it into a motorhome. So, that's the reason why they say to you, when you do that, you need to make them aware of it. And then you've also got something else in addition to that, potentially it might make your vehicle worth more money. If you've got a light commercial vehicle and it is just a van, worth bugger all. You put a load of nice things inside it and make it into a motorhome, it might be worth 30 grand. Well, you try selling that vehicle without it having a V5 that recognises it as being a motorhome, because the taxation is different on it.
Right, exactly. Now, that I think segues into something that I think is also very interesting about this. So this has all been put forward with the headline of it helping classic and modified car owners. However, we need to talk about historic exemption, cars that are registered under historic exemption, because as far as I can tell, Tim, those rules haven't changed, and that if you have a car that deviates from the historic exemption guidelines, it will still fail that. So when we're talking about historic exemption, generally speaking, it means it has to have an engine of a type originally fitted by the manufacturer, or correct me if I've got this wrong, within 10 years of the end of manufacture. It has to be largely quite authentic and faithful to how it was manufactured. Have I got that right, Tim?
Yeah. And but this is then where you kind of got a bit of lunacy going on, because in the time period from when you might have had these vehicles being manufactured, which it could have been 100 years ago, technology has changed. And a good example of that could be something like, what defines or discerns what a modification might be? Well, we've moved more towards ethanol-based fuel, where in the past we used to have lead-based fuel.
Yep.
So if you've converted your cylinder head on your car away from, and put hardened valve seats in it, and you've took out what was just a basically white metal on it, is that a modification? Do you need to declare it? Do we need to, it could be something as simple as that. So then, from a registration point of view, I'll give you another good example. This is a good one. I recently a few years ago, I did a valuation on a Morris Oxford 16.6. And the person who had this vehicle had a real emotional attachment to it. He'd been married in the vehicle with his wife. It was her father's. And he spent an awful lot of money restoring this vehicle, substantial, way more than what the vehicle was worth. As part of that investment, he wanted to make sure that the vehicle would, in essence, last his lifetime and more, and wanted to make it more reliable. And because the vehicle was from the 1930s, the technology in it was politely agricultural.
Yeah. Yes, most cars were of the period, weren't they? By and large, yeah.
So if you know now what you now know, and you applied it to the 1930s, would you still leave it as it was in the 1930s? Well, of course you wouldn't. Now, if you can put modern wheel bearings in a vehicle, for example, if you're not using copper and brass within the construction of it, because it wears out soft.
Yeah, you've changed the white metal bearings in the engine for bearing shells, for example, right? Yeah.
Would you also think you might need an oil pump? You know, rather than having a wet, a wet lubrication system,
yeah.
Do we put an oil pump in it? Do we pump oil around it? So what about actually if we put the oil pump, where gets hot in an engine? Well, it's always the thrust side of a piston when it goes up and down inside the cylinder bore for it. That's a bit where there's most wear. So do we alter the con rods and put oil spray things in it so it sprays up the inside of it to keep the pistons cool? It makes it more reliable. Do we actually put the same pistons in it as in the 1930s, or do we use modern metallurgy in it? So there's loads of things there where he made the best use of the technology that we now have to improve the vehicle. In a lot of ways, you can't even tell or see it.
Yeah.
And even when I was looking around it, I was spotting things going. So the person who helped do the engineering on it was an ex-F1 engineer. And it was absolutely phenomenal, the things that was on it. And you had to really look and spot things. But there's things there where, from a modification point of view, it might not necessarily be something that's performance orientated. It might be about improving a vehicle. And if part of the heritage that we have in England with the cars that we've got as a motor industry and how old it is, I mean, you can go right back to Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost 1907, but we're going back over 110, 15 years or whatever it is.
Yeah, over 100 years. We've got cars made over 100 years ago that still work on our roads. It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
Do we need to protect them though? Do we need to be looking after them? So do we go down the route of putting them back how to were when they first came out, but they might rust, rot, fall apart, corrode, snap, break, destroy themselves? Or, if we can do some things sympathetically, do we modify them? And just in doing that and protecting them and modifying them, does that then mean that they should lose their identity?
I mean, this has been my personal viewpoint for a long time, is that I genuinely believe that the best means of preservation is to keep vehicles on the road. And if that makes them more usable, then ultimately that's the best way of preservation. That's my personal viewpoint. And by means of that probably involves modifying them to a greater or lesser extent so that they are more suitable for today's road conditions, whether that's fitting a 5-speed gearbox or maybe even doing a completely different drivetrain in there. We're talking about electrification of vehicles. That's something that's being pushed more and more. And yet, from what I can tell still, if you had a car that had historic exemption beforehand and you convert it to electric, it may lose its historic exemption.
Yeah. And it's like, well, again, to play devil's advocate, why would you want to draw attention to yourself? So I'm not telling people what to do, but why would you want to draw attention to yourself? And certainly if you love your car, you don't want to lose it, do you? And if it's got a lot of provenance behind it in terms of its identity and its registration, then, really you want to keep it, don't you? You don't want to kind of change its name and identity halfway through its life.
No.
Or at the end of its life. You want to keep it as it is. So.
Okay, so let me try and put a situation which I'm sure is the kind of thing that probably goes through the minds of most of we classic car owners if we've done modifications and whatever. Let's imagine a hypothetical scenario of there's a police stop check, right? And they go over your vehicle. Now, I would think that the main thing they're interested in is the roadworthiness and the condition of the vehicle, as opposed to if it's been modified. Am I on the right track with that, Tim?
Yeah, 100%.
So
absolutely.
If you'd got, I don't know, let's say for the sake of argument, a Ford Pop, an example that we've discussed before. So let's say you've got a 50s Ford Pop, classic period style. It's got a Jaguar independent rear suspension, Viva front end, a Rover V8, right? Provided that is in a roadworthy, safe condition, the lighting all works, the tires are fine, the brakes are good. It's clearly a roadworthy vehicle. Can you see a police officer at the side of the road wanting to impound your car or fine you now because it's a heavily modified car?
No.
No.
No. What it'll come down to is that as long as the vehicle complies with construction use regulations for what was applicable in period. So a good example of that is you've got a 1956 Ford Popper and Anglia that's been modified. It's been modified in the 1970s by how you've said. So which construction use regulations apply? Is it the regulations of the 1970s or is it regulations of the 1950s? Then we come to where we are now in 2025. Is it the regulations now that should exist? Well, part was on what was on the DVLA's website around the registration side of it is that if a vehicle's been modified over 40 years ago, you don't need to sell them anything. So, and that was what I was referring to, this specific case, the conversation I had with Bob to do with something I was involved with, where I was helping an entity out of a situation, and we try to work out how to do it. And the only way
you're just going to have to guess about this one, I'm afraid, viewers. We're not telling this one on screen, but yeah, it's a good
yeah, and it's the only way I can actually explain the best way out of this was, in essence, to tell them to ring the vehicle. Is the only way you can do it. He's like, we can't really ring a vehicle if it's something that's going to be seen in the general public, so we can't really do that. But really, that is what we should need to do with it. It's that. But from the identity side of it and how the police will look at it, is the vehicle what it says it is? Well, it's highly unlikely there's going to be 2 Ford Pops looking at the same registration plate, the same thing. And if it is, it's not probably going to be a major issue because they probably know each other. And it might just be that the vehicles change bodies and chassis and all the rest of it. Is it a danger to the public? Well, if it conforms with construction use regulations, it's fine. And then you've got roadworthiness. So even though vehicles of a certain age are exempt from the MLT regulations, there's still a legal requirement under the Road Traffic Act 1988 to make sure that they comply with roadworthiness. And the duty is on you to make sure it is. So why the government decided to say that vehicles over 40 years old are exempt from an MLT, I don't know, because it's utterly stupid, because everybody cares about the vehicle at that age anyhow, and we still probably MLT it, so it's not saved us any money, it's just stupid. So is the vehicle roadworthy? So if the police inspected it and they saw you've got bald tyres, then they'll have you. If you've got defective lights, they'll have you. If you've got defective brakes, they'll have you. So as long as it's not a danger to the public and it conforms with what's required in law, they won't have you.
I'm going to try and sum this up, Tim, and see if you agree with me. But it seems that the yardstick is make sure your car's roadworthy and well maintained, and don't draw attention to yourself.
Pretty much.
Otherwise, maybe just don't worry about it. You'll be all right now.
We can't say that because we don't know what they're like. But
well, I mean, this is a good point, though, isn't it? Because at the time of filming this, it's 26th of September filming this, these rules have only been out 20 days. So I suppose,
like you said, they've gone from a document that was about 20 pages long to 1 page.
Yeah, right. It's gone from that to that. And I suppose, unfortunately, what it will truly end up taking to find out what the rule is a court case.
What I would say is I'd caveat all the things that we've just discussed today in saying that do your own research after this and make sure that whatever it is you think you've got out of our conversation today, that you're comfortable with it and that you've verified it yourself for its authenticity. And if you act on it, you're doing it of your will and not because of something you've seen on the internet.
Yeah.
And what I'd also say as a caveat as well is that if you're watching this at a later date, things may have changed. Because just because what we're talking about we believe to be accurate at this moment, it might change in the future, and it's up to you to find out if it has changed in any way.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Tim, because at the end of the day, all this is it's me,
fluid,
a motoring journalist, talking to an industry expert at this day, at this time, with as much information as we've been able to find out about this, right, Tim?
Yeah, and I've dug. But the last thing I want to do is make myself look a cock in a video. So
So look, with that is as best as we can find out at the moment. By all means, please jump into the comments section on this video if you've got any questions. If you want to talk about that with the rest of the community, with the rest of the Motorhouse subscribers below.
If anybody of the viewers who are watching at the moment would like to find out more about what I do, or because I've helped Bob stuff, or you want to hear some stories about things I get up to, because I get involved in absolutely all sorts of random things and mad things that, and I am a massive car buff. I've got things that have happened to me that you wouldn't believe. If you want to find out more about what I do or any more of my stories, and hear us two talking more car stuff, let us know. I'm happy to come on again.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, if there's in particular, if there's any big topics regarding motoring law, insurance in particular, please drop it in the comments. I always enjoy having a catch up with Tim anyway, and he's super busy. So getting him in on a podcast like this is a really good opportunity and a chance for us to actually catch up and talk about cars again. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Tim, can't thank you enough. Thanks very much for your time and all your input on this. And I'm sure everyone's grateful as well. Thanks again. And if people want to check you out, what's your website? So
my website's the usual www. So it's motorclaimguru.co.uk. You can also find me on Instagram as well. So I don't do much on there, but I am on it. You find me again on Facebook at Motorclaim Guru. And I'm probably more prevalent on LinkedIn.
Do go and check out Motorclaim Guru, because you've got a lot of very important, free, open
thousands of pages of information. Yeah.
Pages and pages. Tim has done this wonderful thing of just putting all of his knowledge. Well, I don't think there's all of your knowledge on there, Tim. There's a lot of your knowledge that you've made public for people to read, isn't there? So it's
yeah, I mean, if people come on my website, there is a magnifying glass in the top right hand corner. And quite literally anything you can think of, stick it in there. And it might not be everything on there, but you'll probably find something.
Tim, thanks very much for your time, mate. Much appreciated.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I'll see you again, Bob.
If you've enjoyed this video, please do me a big favor, like, share and subscribe. Please especially share this to everyone you know in your classic modified car community, because these rules and regulations really do impact all of us. From me, Mr. Bob, and from Motorhouse, I'll see you again soon.